Abandoned in -25 degrees, a German shepherd watched every passing car until a miracle happened. The night is merciless, the air thick with silence, except for the occasional whisper of the wind cutting through the endless white. Snow blankets the world, swallowing sound, movement, and life itself. But amidst this frozen stillness, someone waits. A German shepherd, thin and trembling, sits by the roadside. His fur, once thick and noble, is now damp and matted with ice. His ribs press against his skin, his breath forming fragile clouds in the bitter air. His eyes, filled with longing and pain, follow every pair of headlights that pass. He does not bark. He does not cry. He only waits. Car after car speeds by, their tires kicking up slush that splashes against his frozen paws. But he does not move. Not yet. Hope is the only thing keeping him upright. And then, as exhaustion presses heavy on his frail body, as the weight of rejection settles into his bones, his head droops, his body sags, his hope begins to fade. Just as the darkness threatens to claim him, a pair of headlights slow. The world is locked in ice, a wasteland of snow stretching endlessly in all directions. The air is razor-sharp, cutting through flesh and bone without mercy. The temperature has plummeted to -25 degrees, a cold so intense that the ground itself is like glass, unyielding and lifeless. The trees stand bare and brittle, their branches heavy with frost. The wind moans through the emptiness, shifting the snow into restless waves. The road is a lonely streak of gray, barely visible under layers of ice. Every passing car is a fleeting streak of light, swallowed by the vast, endless night. In this unforgiving landscape, where even the strongest struggle to survive, one soul refuses to give up. A German shepherd sits at the edge of the road, his body small against the vastness of the frozen world. His fur is crusted with ice, his paws stiff and aching from hours of waiting. His ribs are sharp beneath his thinning coat, his breath uneven and shallow. Every car that passes makes his ears flick, his tail give the faintest wag. His dark eyes, once full of life, are now filled with silent desperation. He shifts slightly, his muscles weak from the cold. He cannot leave. He must stay. Someone will come for him. They have to. Time stretches endlessly, marked only by the fading warmth in his body. Each set of approaching headlights fills him with fragile hope. He struggles to his feet, his legs stiff and trembling. His heart pounds as he wags his tail. Maybe this car will stop. The vehicle speeds past, its lights disappearing into the night. Disappointment crushes his fragile hope, but he refuses to give up. But as the night deepens, the exhaustion becomes unbearable. His body collapses into the snow, too weak to rise again. His breaths come slower, his eyelids growing heavier. The wind howls around him, carrying away the last of his warmth. And then, just as his world begins to fade into darkness, a pair of headlights slow. The frozen night is relentless, wrapping its icy fingers around the helpless German shepherd. Every passing moment feels like a war against the elements, a cruel test of endurance. His body aches from the biting cold, his limbs stiff, his stomach hollow from days without food. The wind howls through the empty road, carrying with it the scent of distant life, warmth, shelter, safety. But for him, those things are nothing more than a fading memory. Survival is all he has left. But for how much longer? He was not always alone. Once, he had a home, a place where his paws rested on warm floors and where familiar voices called his name. But that life ended the moment the car door opened, and he was shoved out into the bitter cold. The confusion had been worse than the cold itself. He had chased after them, his paws slipping on the ice, his breath coming in frantic gasps. But the car never stopped. The red taillights faded into the distance, leaving him in a silence that was far more painful than any wound. His heart had pounded with disbelief, then fear. Had he done something wrong? Would they come back for him? He had waited. He is still waiting. But deep inside, a small, aching part of him knows the truth. They are never coming back. The cold is not just an enemy. It is a slow, creeping force that drains the life from his body. His once strong legs are weak, trembling from exhaustion. The pads of his paws are cracked from walking miles through the snow. His breath labored as the icy air burns his lungs. Each gust of wind feels like 1,000 tiny knives slicing through his thin fur. Hunger gnaws at him, his stomach twisting painfully. But there is no food, no scraps, no kindness from strangers. His ears are numb, his tail frozen stiff, and his once proud posture is now reduced to a huddled form trying desperately to conserve warmth. He wants to move, to search for shelter, but every step feels heavier than the last. His body is losing the fight. Something deep inside him refuses to give up. A voice, faint but determined, pushes him forward. He forces himself to stand, even when his legs threaten to collapse beneath him. He keeps his eyes on the road, hoping, praying that someone, anyone, will see him. His tail gives the smallest wag at the sight of approaching headlights, but he does not have the strength to stand anymore. His head lowers, his body trembling as exhaustion grips him. Just as his vision begins to blur, just as he prepares to surrender to the cold, the lights in the distance slow down. Car is stopping. His heart, weak but still beating, clings to this final shred of hope. Could this be the moment that changes everything? The night is at its coldest, the world wrapped in a suffocating silence as the temperature plummets to a deadly -25 degrees. The German Shepherd, once strong and full of life, now lies motionless in the snow, his body curled into itself in a desperate attempt to preserve what little warmth remains. His fur, once thick and protective, is now frozen stiff, coated in a layer of ice crystals. His breath comes in faint, wispy puffs that vanish into the night, growing weaker with each passing second. The road stretches endlessly before him, an unforgiving path lined with ghosts of headlights that flicker and disappear, leaving him behind just as the last traces of his strength slip away. He had chased after cars at first, barking, pleading, begging for someone to stop, but no one had. His paws, once eager and full of hope, have long since stopped moving. His spirit, once defiant, now trembles beneath the crushing weight of exhaustion and despair. The loneliness is unbearable. The hunger gnaws at him like a relentless predator. But worse than the pain, worse than the cold, is the emptiness that settles into his soul. They left me. They are never coming back. The truth stings more than the frostbite creeping up his limbs. The darkness presses in around him. His body is failing, his heart slowing. This is not just another cold night. It is the night that may steal him away forever. And yet, even as the last flicker of strength begins to fade, even as his weary eyes start to close, something deep inside him whispers, "Is this really the end?" Everything hurts. Every breath is a struggle. Every attempt to move feels like lifting a mountain. His body has reached its limit. His legs, once strong enough to run for miles, now refuse to obey him. He wants to stand, to keep going, but the pain is too much. His stomach twists with a hunger that has long since turned to agony. His throat dry and cracked from days without water. His fur, once a source of warmth, now feels like an icy prison trapping him in his suffering. The world around him begins to blur. The wind howls through the emptiness, carrying with it whispers of a life that no longer feels real. He remembers a warm home, a soft bed, the sound of laughter. He remembers hands that once stroked his fur with kindness, voices that once called his name. But where are they now? Why did they leave him? He had waited. He had believed. Every car that passed had carried with it the possibility of a reunion. But now, even that small sliver of hope has turned to dust. The road is no longer a path to salvation. It is a graveyard of broken promises. His breathing slows. The cold no longer bites at him. Instead, it feels like a soft embrace, lulling him into a sleep he may never wake from. His heartbeat, once strong, is now weak and unsteady. The fight is leaving him. His eyes flutter closed. The darkness welcomes him. And then a sound. It is faint at first, barely noticeable over the howling wind. But then it grows louder. A low hum, a vibration against the frozen ground. A car. But this one is different. It does not speed past him like the others. The headlights do not vanish into the distance. Instead, they slow. They stop. A door creaks open, and for the first time in what feels like an eternity, the cold is met with a rush of warmth from the inside of the vehicle. Footsteps crunch against the ice, hesitant but purposeful. A shadow moves closer, bending down. A human. Oh my God, he's still alive. The voice is soft, filled with something he has not felt in so long: concern. A pair of hands reach out, trembling from the cold but gentle in their touch. They press against his frail body, feeling for life. He does not have the strength to lift his head, but a faint, barely there sigh escapes his lips. It is all he can manage, the smallest sign that he is still here, that he is still fighting. The human reacts instantly. A thick coat is wrapped around him, shielding him from the merciless wind. Strong arms lift him, cradling him against a warm chest. His body is weightless, fragile, but for the first time in what feels like forever, he is no longer alone. The car door closes behind them, sealing out the bitter cold. The hum of the heater fills the cabin, sending waves of warmth through the air. He is placed carefully onto the soft seat, and the stranger's hands move quickly, rubbing his frozen paws, trying to bring life back into them. "You're safe now. I've got you." The words are barely a whisper, but they carry a promise. One that he so desperately wants to believe. His body is weak, his spirit battered, but deep inside, something flickers back to life. Hope. For the first time in a long time, he is not fighting alone. The cold still clings to him, the frost gripping his fur like an unrelenting vice. But something is different now. There is warmth, human warmth. A presence beside him, hands working quickly yet gently to bring him back from the brink. The night no longer feels like a silent grave. It is filled with the soft murmurs of a voice that carries kindness. The German shepherd, once convinced he had been abandoned by the world, is now in the arms of a stranger, a savior. The car's interior is a cocoon of heat, the heater blasting in an attempt to thaw the ice from his body. His muscles ache, stiff and frozen from his long battle with the cold. He shivers violently, but the stranger does not let go. The arms that hold him are firm but careful, wrapping him in a thick coat, rubbing his paws, whispering words he barely understands but can feel. "You're safe now. Just hold on, buddy." It is a promise, a vow. And for the first time in days, maybe weeks, he is not alone. The stranger's hands are warm, pressing against his frail body, checking for signs of life. The German shepherd flinches instinctively, years of instinct telling him to brace for harm. But there is none. Instead, there is care. Care in the way the hands stroke his frozen fur. Care in the way the stranger shields him from the wind, tucking him into their coat as if he is something precious, something worth saving. The soft murmurs continue, soothing, reassuring. The stranger moves slowly, as if afraid that any sudden movement might break him. His body is fragile, exhausted from the relentless fight for survival, but the touch tells him one thing. He is safe now. He does not understand the words, but he understands the feeling. It is something he had long forgotten: kindness. Even as warmth begins to seep into his frozen limbs, a flicker of doubt lingers deep in his chest. He has been here before. Once, long ago, hands had cradled him, voices had called his name with love. And then, one day, they had stopped. He had waited. He had trusted. And they had left him in the snow. His heart is torn between hope and fear. The stranger's voice is gentle, their hands patient. But what if this is just another cruel trick? What if, once he recovers, they abandon him too? His body tenses. He struggles weakly against the warmth, instinct whispering for him to flee, to not trust so easily. The stranger senses his fear, pausing for a moment before speaking softly. "I know you're scared, but I'm not going to leave you." The words pierce through the fog of doubt like sunlight breaking through heavy storm clouds. He stares up at the stranger, searching their face for deception. But all he finds is sincerity. A warmth not just from their touch, but from their eyes. Still, part of him hesitates, because believing in kindness again means risking heartbreak all over again. But as the stranger gently strokes his head, their touch light as a feather, he feels something stir deep within him, something fragile, but alive. Trust. There is no time to waste. The German Shepherd's body is weak, his breathing shallow. He has survived the worst, but he is not safe yet. Hypothermia still lingers in his bones, the frostbite creeping dangerously close to claiming his paws. The stranger knows this. With careful urgency, they lift him fully into the car, shutting the door behind them. The heater is turned up higher, the warm air blasting against his trembling body. He is wrapped tighter in blankets, his frozen paws gently massaged in an attempt to restore circulation. The engine roars to life. Tires crunch against the icy road as the car speeds forward, cutting through the endless stretch of winter. Every second counts. Every mile could mean the difference between life and death. The German Shepherd lets out a faint sigh, the warmth finally reaching his core. His eyelids droop, exhaustion washing over him like a tidal wave. But for the first time, he is not afraid of closing his eyes. Because this time, he is not waiting for the end. This time, he is being taken toward a new beginning. The storm of suffering has passed. The battle against the cold, against hunger, against the quiet despair of being forgotten. It is over. But what comes next? The German Shepherd has known only loneliness for so long. He has known pain, abandonment, and the brutal indifference of a world that kept moving while he waited in the snow. Now everything is different. The frozen landscape is gone, replaced by something unfamiliar. Warmth, safety, hope. He doesn't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, it is no longer a terrifying thought. The first thing he feels is softness. Not the sharp bite of ice or the hard pavement beneath his frail body, but something warm and gentle beneath him. A blanket, a bed, a place meant to bring comfort rather than pain. The air is thick with warmth, wrapping around him like a long-lost embrace. It is the kind of warmth that seeps deep into his bones, slowly melting away the frozen remnants of his suffering. His ears twitch at the faint sound of breathing nearby. Presence. The same voice that had whispered reassurances in the car now murmurs softly in the distance, though he cannot yet open his eyes to see who it belongs to. He is too tired. His body, exhausted from the endless struggle, begs him to rest just a little longer. But his heart races. Where is he? Is he safe? Is this another dream that will fade the moment he wakes? A gentle touch grazes his fur, hesitant but kind. He tenses, waiting for pain, waiting for something cruel. But there is none. Only warmth. Only care. And then, the voice speaks again, soft and patient. You're okay now. You're home. Home. The word lingers in his mind, foreign yet strangely familiar. He does not know if he believes it yet. But the warmth, the undeniable, all-encompassing warmth, is real. As time passes, he begins to stir. His body is stiff, still aching from days of exposure to the cold, but something inside him tells him to move. He lifts his head slightly, eyes blinking open for the first time. The world around him is nothing like the icy nightmare he left behind. There is no blinding snow, no dark road stretching endlessly into the unknown. Instead, there are walls lined with soft light, the scent of food lingering in the air. A fireplace crackles in the corner, its golden glow flickering across the room. And then he sees them, the stranger who saved him, sitting nearby, watching him with quiet patience. They do not move too quickly, as if afraid that any sudden motion might scare him. They simply wait. He studies them carefully, searching for any sign of deception, any reason to run. But there is none. There is no forcefulness, no expectation, only quiet kindness. A bowl of food sits a few feet away, fresh and untouched. He is starving, his ribs pressing against his thin coat, but still he hesitates. The scars of the past whisper to him, reminding him of broken trust and shattered hopes. The stranger notices his hesitation. They pick up a small piece of food, holding it out in their palm. You don't have to be afraid. It's yours. His nose twitches. The scent is intoxicating, a promise of nourishment after endless hunger. But what if this kindness is temporary? What if, after he accepts it, it is taken away again? His body tenses with indecision. His heart wars between instinct and longing. And then, after what feels like an eternity, he takes the first step. He leans forward, cautious, slow, and takes the food gently from their hand. The taste is overwhelming, not just in flavor but in meaning. It is not just food. It is a test, a bridge between fear and trust. And in that moment, something inside him shifts. Maybe he can believe in kindness again. Days pass. Slowly, his body regains strength. His fur, once brittle from frost, begins to soften. His eyes, once dull with exhaustion, now hold a quiet curiosity. The nightmares do not leave all at once, but they begin to fade, replaced by something new, something safe. And then it happens. A moment so small, so seemingly insignificant, yet more powerful than words. The stranger kneels beside him, scratching gently behind his ears. He leans into their touch without thinking, his body reacting before his mind can catch up. And then, before he even realizes it, his tail moves, just the faintest flicker at first, uncertain, hesitant. But then, again, a little stronger, a little more certain. A wag. The stranger notices. Their face lights up, and for the first time, their voice carries a trace of excitement. "That's it, buddy. That's a good boy." And something inside him swells. It is the first time in so long that he has allowed himself to feel happiness, to express something other than survival. He doesn't even understand why it happens, why this small moment, this tiny motion, feels like a victory. But it does, because this, more than anything, means that he has begun to believe again. In warmth, in kindness, in a future beyond survival. The past will always be a part of him. The cold, the loneliness, the days spent watching cars pass without stopping. They will never fully disappear. But now he has something stronger. A new beginning. The journey from abandonment to warmth, from despair to hope, has been long and painful. The German shepherd who once lay trembling in the snow, eyes filled with silent pleas, has now found something he never thought possible: love, safety, and a place to belong. He is no longer just surviving. He is living. The cold no longer dictates his fate, and loneliness no longer defines his days. But beyond his own transformation, his story holds something even greater. A lesson, a reminder, a truth that touches the hearts of all who hear it. There is a moment, one that only those who have experienced true trust can understand, when a bond becomes something more. It is no longer just about companionship or care. It is about belonging, about knowing, deep in one's soul, that no matter what happens, you are not alone. For the German shepherd, that moment has arrived. The person who saved him is no longer just a kind stranger. They are his person. The one who saw him when the rest of the world passed him by. The one who gave him warmth when he had nothing left but cold. The one who waited patiently as he learned to trust again. Never forcing, never demanding, only offering love. And now, wherever they go, he follows. Not because he has to, but because he wants to. Because for the first time in his life, he is home. On winter nights, when the cold wind howls outside, he no longer fears it. Instead, he curls up beside the fireplace, his head resting on the lap of the one who saved him. Their fingers run gently through his fur, a silent promise that he will never be left behind again. He closes his eyes, not in fear, not in exhaustion, but in peace. And outside, beyond the warmth of his home, the snow continues to fall. But he is no longer lost in it. His story is more than just a tale of survival, it is a call to action. How many others like him are still out there, waiting in the cold? How many abandoned souls, both animals and humans, are watching the world pass them by, hoping for just one act of kindness to change their fate? This German shepherd was lucky. Someone stopped. Someone cared. But not every story ends this way. His journey is a reminder that kindness is never small. A simple gesture, a moment of compassion, can mean the difference between life and death. between despair and hope, between an ending and a new beginning. And so, as his rescuer strokes his fur, whispering to him that he is safe, that he is loved, the message is clear. No one deserves to be left behind. Not in the cold. Not in the dark. Not ever. And maybe, just maybe, his story will inspire someone else to stop, to care, to be the miracle that another lost soul is desperately waiting for. This story is not just about one abandoned dog. It's about the countless others still waiting. Waiting in the cold. Waiting in shelters. Waiting on the streets with eyes full of silent pleas, hoping that someone, anyone, will notice them before it's too late. But you can make a difference. If the story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Take action. Support your local animal shelters. Adopt, don't shop. If you see an animal in need, don't look away. Be the person who stops. A moment of kindness can change a life forever. Share the story to spread awareness. Let the world know that no one, whether animal or human, should ever be left behind in the cold. Together, we can create a world where compassion wins, where no soul has to suffer alone. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to turn a tragedy into a miracle. Will you be that person?